Hey, Armand here with your forecast for the week of May 9th, 2021. It's a week with quite a bit of activity. We start out coming into the new moon on Tuesday, and this new moon is in Taurus. And so, Sunday, Monday through Tuesday, maybe a little bit quieter kind of energy. The new moon in Taurus is really good for any new moon is good for planting seeds, but I mean, actually, this is really good for literally planting seeds. So this is a very good time to look at any sort of project that you want to start that has something to do, anything physical, anything earthy. So I mean, yes, this is the new moon for gardening. The new moon is going to be trying to Pluto and Capricorn, very good for building anything that has to get built in the physical level, but of course also too at other levels too, not just on that earthy physical level. So this is a very good time for beginnings. As always, you sort of want to set your intention right around the new moon on Tuesday. And then I would say as early as Wednesday, you start making some little action that would get you ready to go. And I'm thinking, by the time we get to the weekend, or maybe on Monday and Tuesday of next week, then it's time to start really pushing forward with things. But I mean, we're going to come out of this new moon, as much as it's a quiet time. Mars is making aspects to Uranus and also to Chiron right after the new moon. And so it's an edgy kind of let's get going quickly type of thing. And I think that, even the latter part of this week, it's good for really starting to get moving on things. Remember that whole like setting your intention thing is great, but the cosmos is kind of literal. So do something. That's always an important thing. Now, coming out of the new moon is a big deal. We also have a big change coming up this week, and that is Jupiter is moving into Pisces on Thursday, the 13th. Now, Jupiter had a pattern of going through a sign in about a year. Now it's sort of messing that up a little bit. Jupiter is going to be in Pisces from May until the end of July. And then he's going to retrograde back out into Aquarius, spend most of the rest of the year there, and then only at the very end of the year get back into Pisces. But we'll deal with that in a separate video that'll come out maybe sometime around Wednesday. So keep your ears and eyes peeled for that. We'll discuss Jupiter and Pisces for all the signs, but we'll do that in a separate video. In the meantime, Jupiter will be at the very end of Aquarius, so he'll be rallying all those Aquarian issues. So there we'll see a lot of stuff, particularly around, progressive social causes and things like that. Maybe a little bit of extra technology information as well. Jupiter going into Pisces is going to shift things a little bit, and we'll get a big push on those Piscean themes. Again, I don't want to talk about it too much here because we'll talk about it separately later in the week. But what I would suggest you do is just see what happens, mostly in the collective, but also a bit in your own personal life, and see what happens on Thursday and on Friday. Because usually when a planet goes into the sign, you get a flagship kind of issue. So sort of show you what things are going to be about for that sign, for the planet in that sign. So that is one of the bigger energy shifts over the course of this week. As we get to the weekend, the moon is going to be in Cancer, a little bit more protective vibe, I guess. And yet, I'm not exactly sure that it's going to feel quite that way. I think the Cancer moon has been it still has to deal with Pluto, but things are loosened up a little bit now for it. It's not under quite the stress it was for the last couple of years. But we do often see this sort of like protective, by the home type of energy, a little bit more conservative kind of vibe when the moon is in Cancer. That's a general rule. It may not be exaggerated anymore, but it's a general rule. The other thing that is happening on the weekend is not happening. It is Mercury is going into the shadow of his retrograde, and Mercury will not actually stop to retrograde until the end of the month. But now that he's going to be in his shadow we may start to pick up on some Mercury retrograde kind of themes. So it would be really good if you could take care of any sort of tech needs by the weekend. I would probably think, well, Jupiter is at the very end of Aquarius, like Wednesday, Thursday type of thing. That would be a terrific time to do that. Um, but be aware also too that Mercury going into his shadow can sometimes, it's not usually that dramatic in terms of problems or anything like that. I don't know if you're a Mercury retrograde believer or denier. I think that with so many people now dialed into Mercury retrograde, now that it's become kind of a household name, I think that actually it's probably getting stronger as we sort of collectively empower Mercury retrograde. But it's a real trickster energy, it's a real trickster energy, and you can't even rely on it to be unreliable. It's very, very hard to know what's going on, or what to expect with Mercury retrograde. It could be beneficial in ways that you hadn't thought. You might find that there's some little narrative. I was thinking it might have something to do with something that you're reading, maybe go back to reading little stories or something like that. But there might be some narrative in your life that, becomes sort of interesting and uncertain, and it will probably take through the retrograde and then through the other side of the shadow period, probably to sometime in the first half of July before things kind of work themselves out. So you might start looking towards next weekend and see if anything seems to be coming up that's kind of grabbing your interest. Mercury retrograde can be a real pain in the neck in terms of practicalities, but sometimes you get these like fun little stories that'll just sort of weave their way through. We'll have to see how that goes, or you'll have to see how that goes. I talk about Mercury retrograde so much now as opposed to at the end of the month, because when we get to the end of the month and Mercury is going retrograde, well, then Saturn is going retrograde and we have an eclipse, and there's a lot of stuff happening in the last week of this month, so we may not give it full attention. So maybe it's a good idea to start thinking about it now. At any rate, if you have any tech types of things or any car issues or things like that, this would be a really good time to get that wrapped up a little bit early. Okay, so it's a busy week. You might take it a little bit easier through Tuesday, but then it's really start moving forward. Pick up speed as we go this week. See what happens with Jupiter going into Pisces. Watch for the video on Jupiter in Pisces and start thinking about that whole Mercury retrograde business. That's a lot. I'll see you next week.